Quinton Klabon from Institute for Reforming Government is joining me on the program to talk about this. It's all Act 10's fault, right? It's the phonics law that isn't even being implemented, and it's all the fault of Act 10. Because don't you know, Quinton, that 18-year-old freshman in college wants to be a teacher so she can be a union member and get union benefits under the collective bargaining agreement, so she's not going into the profession because she's not getting the same kind of bennies under the CBA. Good to have you, by the way.
Yeah, if the Packers lose to the Bears again this year, I'm just going to blame Act 10. I mean, apparently it's the problem for everything.
Right.
So thanks for having me. There is a report that comes out every year that basically gives the state of the teaching profession. And it always says the same thing every year. We're not doing a good job in Wisconsin of training teachers. We're not doing a good job of paying teachers. And we're not doing a good job of keeping teachers in the classroom once they start. And I think a lot of people agree on those things. I think the question is just, what do we do about it? And so if you ask me, and if you ask gentlemen like Will Flanders, if we ask you, they'll probably say something like, make sure that UWs are actually doing a good job of training teachers. Make sure that the money in schools is actually going to pay teachers and not all the stuff that schools are doing that they're not required to do. And making sure that we make classrooms a good place to be in. But if you ask Superintendent Underly, and if you ask the reporters who wrote puff pieces on her meeting in Green Bay yesterday, they'll tell you the solution is they need to raise your taxes a whole bunch so that they can put more money into schools. And that's not a sustainable solution, especially as people are considering the referenda today.
Yes, if there's a school referendum on your ballot, the answer is no. That's the answer. The schools don't need more money. The schools have fewer students. They don't need new buildings. You don't need a swimming pool. You don't need ground source heat pumps. You don't need LEED certified climate change friendly stuff. There are fewer and fewer students in Wisconsin schools, and there's more and more and more money being poured into education. As you just heard Will Flanders talk about, a record amount of dollars has been poured into Wisconsin education. Let's get back to the teachers. They have no control of their classrooms because the control of their classrooms has been taken away from them. Their teachers union doesn't do jack. They don't say, we need discipline in the classrooms. The teachers union says discipline in the classrooms is racist. We need more DEI stuff. That does not translate to a good environment for somebody to want to make $48,000 a year, right? Even if they do get 3 months off in the summertime. If you are worried about someone throwing something and hitting you in the head, choking you out, attacking you, or just generally not listening to you, maybe that's a grind, huh? And maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe we should start there. I think that would be the first place I would start.
Yeah, I don't know if Act 10, I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I don't know if Act 10 is going to stop parents from walking into schools, past security guards, and punching teachers. I know there are a bunch of teachers who are really frustrated. There are kids who will hang out in the hallways just during class, and if they scold them and send them back to class, they may get a call from their principal saying, hey, this is going to cause problems for us. Take a step back. That makes schools a really miserable environment to teach in. Everybody wants to be a teacher, goes in because they love teaching kids. They want to, interact with kids, help them learn and help them reach their goals. And when you don't protect teachers and when you don't make the classroom a great place to be, that just creates problems. And, taxing people more, revoking Act 10, that's not going to solve any of those problems.
Correct. Okay. We're also, the more you churn out kids coming from these chaotic environments into college when they're practically illiterate, we'll get to that in a second, when they're practically illiterate, and then you want the practically illiterate underperforming student who is not actually performing above grade level to be a teacher, but you've put them in a chaotic environment. How many of them do get into college and say, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to put myself through the hell that I saw my teachers put through. No thanks. I'll choose something else, even if it's stringing together gig jobs and a barista, part-time job. So there's that. Then there's the fact that we're not even equipping teachers to teach kids how to read properly. And let's be honest here. The teachers who are not teaching kids how to read properly probably are teachers who are not taught how to read properly, Quinton.
Oh, it is. This will shock people. I hope nobody's driving. If so, pull over. So there is a test that a lot of Wisconsin teachers have to take in order to pass teachers. Kind of like if you're a nurse or an accountant, you have to pass this test. It's called the Foundations of Reading Test, FORT. 25% of college students in Wisconsin fail this test.
Wow.
They're paying tuition to go to school for 4 years, specifically to be able to do this main part of their job, and a quarter fail it. In Massachusetts, the state that we copied this test from, only 10% fail it, which is still pretty high, but only 10%. Meanwhile, in Wisconsin, it's a quarter. You have universities like UW Green Bay, over a third are failing it. Superior, over a third. Whitewater, which is one of our big education schools in Wisconsin, 3 out of 10 fail the test. Again, spending more money and taxing more is not going to solve the problem of UW not doing an adequate job of preparing these teachers, or, like you said, making sure that the kids entered college able to read so that they could learn well to be able to teach the next generation to read. It's not going to solve any of those problems.
That's another thing Jill Underly blamed, was the phonics law. We have a phonics law that has not been implemented. We're not teaching phonics. We had $50 million set aside to implement the science of reading law. We'll call it phonics, the science of reading law. And Tony Evers first tried to steal the $50 million. And then the court said you couldn't steal the $50 million. And then the $50 million went into DPI, where Jill Underly promptly tried to spend it on everything except phonics. It didn't matter. All the school districts were supposed to comply with this, but nearly none of them have actually complied. And I don't think a single one has actually begun the process of teaching phonics, teaching the phonics-based method of teaching kids to read. And this is only up until 4th grade, for Pete's sake.
A lot of people think families have moved from public schools to private schools over the last few years. That's really not true. It's basically about the same. Where they're really moving is to homeschooling, because parents feel confident that they're going to be able to teach their children to read because they're not receiving it in their public schools. And that's really unfortunate. It should not be that way. They should be great places for kids to learn. And until that changes, we're going to end up in these same enrollment declines. But I think you raised a really important point, which is everything where we ask schools to equip students to do better is somehow a problem. And yet, when we try to make things simpler to become a teacher, those just aren't taken up. So, for example, there's something called a teacher apprenticeship. This is in all 50 states at this point. It's a bipartisan thing. President Trump loved it. President Biden loved it. It's just a great idea. How about when you're in college, instead of just reading about how kids learn, you actually go and teach and help teach in classrooms so that you're not, you know how to manage kids once you actually graduate. You know how to teach reading because you haven't just read a book about it. You've actually done it. So other states have this. States like Tennessee and North Dakota are churning out hundreds of teachers this way. Not only do you get more experience, you actually get paid for your student teaching, which we don't do in Wisconsin. Wisconsin tried to do this. Actually, the group that I work for, Institute for Reforming Government, reforminggovernment.org for the website, we actually provided some ideas. A bill was taken up in the legislature. Governor Evers vetoed this bill to get teachers paid and more experience during college, and then did a program of his own. While other states are turning out hundreds of these teachers, Wisconsin has about 10. So there are all these complaints about how the state is forcing schools to do things. That's one thing. But when we try to give them the tools to be able to do things better, unfortunately, our education leadership is not taking that up.
Right. And by the way, we elect our DPI superintendent in spring elections, where there's low voter turnout and special interests like teachers union and other government employees unions who reliably vote left wing always make sure to keep the status quo in place. And then they cheer on more tax increases and then blame the Republicans because they can't afford to stay in their houses. They can't afford there's a lack of affordability. Then someone else gets blamed for the decisions that every single one of these leftists have made for the rest of the state of Wisconsin and themselves. So I don't really play the world's smallest violin for teachers who aren't getting paid that much because, quite frankly, they don't earn it. They don't earn it. They don't complain. They don't demand more. They don't demand the discipline in the classrooms. They don't fight their teachers union. They don't demand to have access to better tools so that they can actually teach children. They don't earn it. But I'd like them to. I'd like things to be the way they were when I was a kid, in which case I'd be cheering on above inflation increases in salary for teachers every single year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When you have, there's going to be a report that comes out in a couple of weeks. It's probably going to say that we have the most staff in Wisconsin schools ever, not like per student, ever, more than when you were in school, more than when I was in school, even though we're going to have the fewest kids since the 1950s. But all of that growth has been people who aren't teachers. And so it is incumbent upon the state of Wisconsin, whether it's at your local school board level, at your state level, to say, hey, if we want teachers paid more, we need to make sure that they're the ones that we're focused on in classrooms and not all of this other stuff. Schools are not going to solve all of children's problems. They're there to teach children to learn. And until we focus on teachers, until we focus on learning, things are never going to change. They're going to keep getting more and more expensive, and you're going to keep seeing referenda show up every 3 years in your district.
Yeah, the answer is no on the referendum today. Whatever referendum's on your ballot, the answer on that one is no. You know, as you were talking, and I'm thinking back, the staff, I'm going to think back in my high school. We had 3 secretaries, and they were called secretaries. We had a nurse assistant, and we had 3 guidance counselors, and the guidance counselors didn't have assistants. That, at least to the perception of the student, that's what we had in a high school. That's a pretty low amount of staff, and somehow it ran okay.
Yeah, I feel like we turned out well, and now the staff have staff who also have staff, and things just keep on adding up. You have states, and again, this will not surprise you. People know that some red states are really doing an excellent job on education, which is not the common perception in a lot of legacy media. Mississippi doing great on reading. Also on staff, they're also doing a great job. States like Iowa and South Dakota haven't added all of these new things. They're basically doing things the way they did, 10, 15 years ago. And guess what? They had the money to give teachers thousands of dollars in raises. This is something that other states are doing. Wisconsin is just choosing not to do it. And if we choose this path, again, things are going to keep getting more expensive. We're going to keep seeing these reports about how teachers are unsatisfied, and we're going to be the ones to blame.
The teachers union hack, who's the governor, is the reason why we're not doing it in Wisconsin. We have a Republican legislature. They've put forth many good pieces of education-related legislation. And even the ones that do pass and get signed into law end up getting strip mined or corrupted by the same teachers union hack. The union, get rid of the union. Someone needs to start that movement, not just Act 10, but get rid of the union. You get rid of the union and you're going to unleash the power of education, the enthusiasm, the innovation in education that we have not seen in this country in my lifetime. I appreciate the time. Quinton Klabon, reforminggovernment.org is the website. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
And we will take a break on the Vicki McKenna Show.